YAK is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players in which players will be trading resources back and forth with moving carts dragged by yaks around the board. And you are collecting food from one cart and then giving food to the next cart, or even to the same cart after a while because they keep moving. The idea is you get food, then you give them food, and by giving yaks food you get stones, and you use these stones to build a wall on your play area. As you also have an area here where you store your own resources. So you're going to put the stones there. The first stone can go anywhere in those sections there that you see printed there, and then following stones need to be touching other stones, and you can go up like this if you, of course, each stone on a higher level needs to be touching two at the lower level. These light blue stones are crystals, and they count as wild, and color is super important. So you'll keep trading with the carts and getting food, and then thanks to the food getting stones, building your wall. The end of the game is triggered where somebody has a wall which is at least 4 levels high. That triggers the end of the game. Everybody takes a turn and then you score. You will score points for the size of each area. So here I have an area which is 2, and that will score me a glorious amount of 3 points. I could choose at the end of the game to declare that one as an orange, so that would score me a 6. The identity of the wild crystals only needs to be determined at the end of the game. Then you also score for the number of groups that you have. If I call this one a yellow, now I have 2 groups of 2, and that's how it works there. You get a point for each single stone that is not part of any group. You get a point for being the player that triggers the end of the game, and that also gives you the skewed marker. You get a point for having the most food at the end of the game, and that's the idea. The player with the most points at the end of the game wins the game. Now, here we have these cards that basically will determine the gameplay. And gameplay is very similar to a drafting game of the pick and pass variety. And that is why I was curious about this game. I like second generation games that take an idea that was more basic some 10 years ago and add to it. So in Sushi Go or Seven Wonders, so we pass the cards and we just deplete the hand of cards gradually. Here the idea is that these cards will move around the board, and each time you will get to do an action with the card sitting right in front of you. And the main action will be either to take food from the card or to give food to the card to take the stones instead. These do look nice and pretty cute. The wheels are spinning, the yaks are very cute, the cards, they have different sections for the stones and the food. Each card also has a restriction. They're kind of picky yaks. For example, this one is lactose intolerant. You really don't want to give them milk because no one likes a gassy yak. And that's the idea. Each player has also a hand of 3 action cards. The general idea of the game is that everybody will look at the card is in front of them, will select an action, then we reveal it simultaneously, an action card, and then we perform the 2 actions indicated on the selected card, top to bottom. 3 cards, in truth, is gonna be mainly 2 because this action isn't nearly as profitable as these other 2, so you'll be rarely considering 3 options. You'll try to perform one of these, and if you can't, you'll consider this one, maybe. Once everybody's taken their actions, then the cards move, and they simply advance to the next space, so you see what's coming in most cases. Of course, as the stones are removed from there, new stones will need to be drawn and placed in the cards. And I have to tell you, this bag is just not good enough to mix them well. Reaching and mixing the bottom layers is very hard, which is important, especially because of the white. Oh, see, I was looking at the camera. This looks like a white, but it's a gray. A white Oh, I cube. And this, by the way, is a problem. I'm not colorblind or color impaired, but even I sometimes have to look twice or three times to make sure that I know the dark blue from the crystal color. The color are not super well differentiated. Anyways, when you draw a white, that's a fog, and what happens is that simply the cards will start turning the other way. And there's a fairly fiddly and elaborate procedure to determine how often the fog markers are drawn here, because after you draw a fog marker, it goes on the display there, and when three of those three white fog markers have been drawn, then this token is removed, the markers, the fog blocks go back in there, and then this time when they go back there and they're drawn, they sit there, they don't go back in the back. Basically, half of the rule book is to explain this one procedure, and I just wish there was a more elegant way of doing what basically is to determine when the YAKs are gonna change direction. Now, we're talking about the actions, and that is really what the game is about. Oh, also you want to see the baby YAK, baby YAK that determines the first player. The actions, give food to a YAK or to the invisible card driver. You can give any combination of food within the restrictions of the card. For example, this only takes any two, doesn't take one of each. Again, in the other ones we saw, each does not take a kind of food, and we have, in case you miss it, chicken, milk, and bread. And so you give any combination of food, and you collect stones on the card in front of you based on this rate here. 1 food for 1 stone, 3 food for 2 stones, 5 for 3, and an extra 1 for each crystal that you want to take. And suppose, for example, I decide to take this crystal here, and then I spend any 2. And I give them to the card usually, but this card is already full of stuff, so I'll put it in the market, which is the area in the middle instead. That's for that action, and then everybody moves. That was for that turn. Other action. You collect food. You take all of one kind of food from the card in front of you, and then you draw a stone from the bag and you place it in the card. Now I'm seeing the next card here that most likely will come, unless somebody draws a white stone, is that YAK doesn't eat bread, so I'm gonna take the action of collecting food to load up on chicken. And again, and then I draw a stone and I place it there. There we go. As for the last, and then everybody resolves their actions, and then you would move the cards. So the last action is the market, in which you take one or two food from the market in the middle of the table, and you place them there. Again, this actually is just not as profitable, because if I can take 5 or 3 or 4 of the same kind from the card in front of me, is a lot better than 1 or 2 from the market. Then you draw a cube from the bag and you place it in any card, which seems pretty good, because I say, well, I really need this block, so I'm going to put it here so it'll come to me. But then, of course, it may be that another player that turn, before the next turn goes, draws a fog marker, and then these turn. But this is the idea. You got these 3 actions that basically amount to taking food, giving food, getting stones, building your wall. And again, you continue like this until a player has a wall of at least 4 levels. Then you finish the game, and then you count points. And this is how, in essence, you play YAK. So here you have a game that definitely looks great, visually speaking, has a really impressive table presence, great Instagram value, I would say, but unfortunately not much else. When you start playing the game, problems emerge, including from the point of view of the production. it really looks like a lot of thinking went into making sure that the game looks great. But then there are just so many other aspects that look like they appear to have been overlooked. Starting from the bag, how is it possible that no one noticed that after setup you need to add those white cubes in there, and you just no way of mixing them in easily. You need to dump everything out, mix them in, and then put them back in there. Those cards look great, but they're also pretty tight. You have to fumble with the components, fumble with the food, making sure it doesn't fall off, and it still does, making sure that the bread is lined up. That's not the kind of thinking I want to be doing when I'm playing a game. The box, it's very hard to put the game back in the box. And if it looks like nitpicking, is I'm trying to give you a sense of the difference between what the game looks like when you see a picture online, or when you're actually interacting with the components in the real world, which is what you will be doing if you decide to buy this game and add it to your collection. Putting it back in the box is very hard. Again, you have to dump out the stones, put them in a bag, and then flatten them and spend some time moving the pieces around to be able to be sure you're able to put the lid back on. And if this game was truly epic, the beauty and elegance of, say, Splendor, simple rules, deep strategy, fine. I would be still willing to do all that. But the game doesn't have that. The game doesn't really have a lot of strategy. The game is very tactical. The game will move things around in a way that is either random because of the way things are drawn from the back, or controlled by the player, so outside of your range of agency, and it just gives you some opportunities, and some will be a lot more obviously good than others. There is a card in front of me that has a ton of food and a lot of stone. Well, I'll hoard some food. Then a card will come around which has a lot of stones and a lot of food. Well, that's the time to trade the food with the stones. And I wanted to see there was some less obvious strategy. Well, yes, here there's a lot of food, but what if I collect a different kind of food? They may pay off later. What if I take one stone now instead of the 5 or the 4 stones that I can take next time? I tried to think about that, but that just didn't seem to be worth the effort, when indeed so much stuff can happen that if I try to think ahead, I may never be able to complete a strategy because the YAKs start walking the opposite direction. Somebody else does something. And that's actually how I played the game. I simply thought I'm going to grab as much food as I can when I can, and as much stone as I can when I can. And only when the card in front of me doesn't look like it has anything really, I'll take stuff from the market. By playing with the super basic algorithm, so to speak, I was able to win against friends of mine who are hardcore gamers. And I would say if there was a more subtle strategy, they would have figured it out. They're much smarter than me. They defeat me very regularly, and I like that. I like that challenge. And I feel if such a simple strategy was able to beat the really smart ones, the Minecraft ones of my group, maybe that's all it takes. Also because ultimately you get a sense that you're going to score almost everything. I got big groups, I scored those. But I have many groups, I scored those. I have single stones, I scored those also. When you get the feeling that you score pretty much anything or everything, the scores are going to be pretty close. And then factors other than building your wall, which was supposed to be the point, become disproportionately valuable. Being the one that triggers the end of the game, you get that token which is worth 3 points. Of course, that's a differential of 6 points because if I have it or don't have it and you have it. And so if 2 players go within 6 points of range, or one of them was the one triggering the game, the person wins and the other person would win otherwise. And that's that which happened incidentally. And then I got the sense that again there's just a disproportionate factor there. When if you score almost everything, scores are going to be tight, and then it becomes to who wins the game first without a wall that is not too crazy. And a friend said, well, sure, gameplay is really bland. No one was excited about this game. It's really bland, but maybe with a child, a little kid. But honestly, a child growing up in a family with adults that love board games, that love hobby games, so they got King of Tokyo at home. They got so many games. They got Pandemic, Ticket to Ride. You just have so many games that are not more complex than this one and have actual strategy and actually really take advantage of all of the innovations in gaming culture that we have seen in the last 10-15 years. So YAK just looks good if you see pictures of it. Doesn't have anything that is particularly interesting in its gameplay because, again, scoring doesn't really reward good gameplay. There are enough random elements that you don't feel the strategy. The putting in the effort to develop a strategy really affects your chances of victory. And so that's it. You have a game that looks great in pictures, but doesn't really have anything particularly interesting in it when it comes to actually playing it, which of course is a pretty fatal flaw in my book when it comes about games.